These are some of the most shocking theme park accidents ever recorded. As the video goes on, the incidents get more intense, more unexpected, and far more terrifying. The India Fairground Ride Disaster. In early February 2026, a shocking incident unfolded at a funfair in Faridabad, India, when a pendulum-style amusement ride suddenly collapsed mid-operation at the Surajkund Funfair. Viral footage shows the ride swinging normally, packed with riders, while families watched from nearby. Without warning, one side of the main support structure began to tilt. Within seconds, the massive frame buckled. The gondola dropped violently as the structure gave way, triggering screams and chaos across the fairground. Bystanders and police officers rushed toward the ride as it started failing, attempting to help those trapped. Tragically, Inspector Jagdish Prasad, who was assisting during the emergency, was struck during the collapse and later died from his injuries. At least 13 others were injured, including women and children. Some suffered injuries from falling debris, while others were hurt in the impact or the panic that followed. The aftermath showed victims lying on the ground as rescuers and fairgoers worked desperately to help. Authorities have since launched an investigation to determine whether structural failure, poor maintenance, or regulatory lapses contributed to the tragedy. Catastrophe on 360 degrees at Green Mountain Park.
Say that 4 people of the 23 were seriously injured. The government ordered the resort closed while it investigated the incident.
In July 2025, visitors at Green Mountain Park in Taif were enjoying what seemed like a normal evening at the park. The spotlight attraction that night was a massive pendulum-style thrill ride known as 360 degrees. You know the type. It swings riders high into the air, rotating them almost upside down, giving that intense, stomach-dropping sensation people line up for. The ride was in full motion. It had climbed high into its arc, packed with dozens of passengers, when something went horribly wrong. Mid-swing, the central support pillar suddenly snapped, and this wasn't a small malfunction. The entire structure split in half while riders were still strapped in. The passenger section dropped violently toward the ground as onlookers screamed in shock. Videos that later surfaced online show the exact moment the metal frame gives way. 1 second it's swinging, the next it collapses. The impact injured 23 people. Several were reported to be in critical condition. Some witnesses even claimed parts of the broken structure recoiled backward, striking people standing nearby. Emergency responders rushed to the scene within minutes, clearing the area and transporting the injured to nearby hospitals. The park was immediately shut down as investigators sealed off the wreckage. Authorities launched an urgent investigation to determine whether it was a structural defect, poor maintenance, metal fatigue, or a failure in safety inspections. What makes this incident so disturbing isn't just the collapse itself, it's how sudden it was. No warning, no slow malfunction, just one loud crack and chaos. And it raises a chilling question about theme park safety worldwide. How secure are these towering machines we trust with our lives? Suspended in terror on Atmosphere at Oaks Amusement Park.
Oregon. They say help is on the way.
On June 14, 2024, what began as a routine thrill at Oaks Amusement Park turned into a nightmare suspended in midair. The pendulum ride known as Atmosphere had been operating normally, swinging riders higher with each arc until it reached the top of its rotation. Then it stopped. Not at the bottom, not upright, upside down. 28 riders were left hanging inverted at the highest point of the structure, suspended dozens of feet above the ground. What should have been a brief, adrenaline-filled moment stretched into nearly 30 minutes of helpless uncertainty. Their only support was the over-the-shoulder restraints locking them into place. As minutes passed, the physical strain intensified. Riders later described overwhelming pressure in their heads as blood rushed downward. Some reported difficulty breathing. Others experienced burst blood vessels in their faces from remaining inverted for so long. But beyond the physical discomfort was something worse. The realization that the ride was not restarting. Panic spread quickly. Portland fire and rescue crews responded within minutes, treating the situation like a high-angle emergency. Firefighters coordinated closely with park operators to manually lower the massive pendulum in a slow, controlled descent. Below, anxious family members and onlookers watched every movement. After nearly half an hour, the ride was finally brought back down. All 28 passengers were safely evacuated. Most avoided serious injury, though one rider with a pre-existing medical condition was taken to a hospital for evaluation. The attraction, which had opened in 2021, was immediately shut down pending a full investigation involving the manufacturer. The Smiler crash at Alton Towers.
Do you know, I was looking at my phone, I thought that ain't gonna happen. Fucking hell.
In 2015, what was meant to be a record-breaking thrill at Alton Towers became one of the most disturbing roller coaster disasters in modern British history. The Smiler was famous for its 14 inversions, twisting riders through a maze of steel at nearly 50 miles per hour. It looked chaotic by design, almost like the track had been tangled on purpose to confuse the senses. Unfortunately, confusion was not limited to the riders. On June 2nd, engineers were attempting to manage heavy crowds by running multiple trains at once. Earlier in the day, a test carriage had stalled on the track. Instead of physically checking where it was, staff assumed the computer system was malfunctioning and manually overrode safety warnings. That single decision changed everything. Moments later, a fully loaded train was dispatched. It sped around a bend and slammed directly into the stationary carriage at high speed. The front row absorbed the full impact. Two young women, Leah Washington and Vicky Balk, suffered life-changing leg amputations. Others endured shattered bones, collapsed lungs, and deep psychological trauma. The crash scene was chaotic, with passengers trapped in crushed seats high above the ground. Investigators later uncovered serious gaps in safety culture, including weak risk assessments and poor communication between technicians. The company that owned the park admitted responsibility and received a multi-million-pound fine. The Smiler eventually reopened with new safety measures, but the emotional scars remain. For many visitors, the bright yellow loops no longer represent excitement. They represent a reminder that even automated systems fail when human judgment fails first. Killer whale attack at SeaWorld Orlando.
40-year-old Don Brancho was one of SeaWorld's most experienced trainers, one of only a dozen allowed to work with the park's largest whale, Tilikum.
For years, SeaWorld Orlando promoted close encounters with massive orcas as magical family entertainment. Visitors could sit poolside, eat lunch, and watch trainers interact with whales weighing more than 6 tons. The illusion was powerful. It suggested harmony between humans and one of the ocean's most intelligent predators. On February 24, 2010, that illusion shattered. Veteran trainer Don Brancho was performing during a post-show interaction with Tilikum, a large male orca with a controversial history. As she lay near the edge of the pool, the whale suddenly grabbed her and pulled her underwater. Guests initially struggled to understand what they were seeing. The attack lasted far longer than anyone expected, and attempts to distract the whale failed. This was not Tilikum's first deadly incident. He had previously been linked to 2 other deaths, yet continued performing under revised safety procedures. After the tragedy, investigators concluded that trainers had been exposed to unnecessary risk. Don died from drowning and severe traumatic injuries. The incident triggered widespread public debate about marine park ethics. A major documentary later examined the psychological effects of captivity on orcas and questioned whether entertainment justified the danger. SeaWorld was fined and required to implement physical barriers between whales and trainers. The company eventually phased out theatrical orca shows, though the animals remained in captivity. The event permanently altered public perception. What once seemed like a joyful spectacle came to symbolize something darker. Terminal velocity tragedy at Extreme World. Extreme World marketed itself as a playground for adrenaline seekers. Among its most daring attractions was Terminal Velocity, a face-down freefall experience unlike traditional drop towers. Riders were not secured to a seat. Instead, they were released in a horizontal dive, expected to land safely in a suspended net supported by inflated airbags below. It looked extreme, but controlled. On July 30, 2010, a young girl named Tegan Marty lined up for what she had dreamed of riding. After safety gear was fitted, she was positioned for release. Unknown to her and her parents watching nearby, the safety net had not been properly set, and the airbags beneath it were not inflated. The operator released her anyway. With nothing prepared to absorb the impact, she struck the ground hard. Witnesses described the horrifying stillness that followed. Emergency responders airlifted her to hospital with severe injuries, including spinal fractures, a crushed pelvis, and internal trauma. Miraculously, she survived. Investigators later determined that the operator had failed to wait for confirmation that the landing system was secure. He pleaded no contest to reckless injury charges and received a fine. The ride was permanently shut down. Tegan faced months of rehabilitation, relearning how to walk and rebuild her strength. Her recovery became a testament to resilience, but it also exposed how a single overlooked safety step can transform entertainment into catastrophe. Terminal velocity promised the sensation of free fall. Instead, it revealed the terrifying consequences of free fall without preparation. Orlando free fall tragedy at Icon Park.
Was he too big for the ride? Tyree Sampson, the gentle giant who plunged to his death at an amusement park in Orlando.
When Orlando Freefall opened at Icon Park in late 2021, it immediately claimed a bold title. At over 400 feet tall, it was promoted as the world's tallest freestanding drop tower. Riders were lifted high above International Drive, tilted forward slightly, and then plunged toward the ground at highway speeds. It looked intense, but controlled. On March 24, 2022, 14-year-old Tyree Sampson visited the attraction while on vacation. He boarded the ride with other guests and was secured with a shoulder restraint. As the tower made its first descent, something went terribly wrong. Witnesses watched in horror as Tyree slipped from his seat and fell roughly 100 feet, striking the ground below. Investigations later revealed critical failures. Tyree exceeded the ride's weight limit, yet he was allowed to board. The restraint system had also been manually adjusted to accommodate larger riders, increasing the gap between the harness and the seat. That modification reduced the margin of safety. When the drop began, the force of gravity did the rest. The incident sparked national outrage. Tyree's family demanded accountability, arguing that basic safety checks should have prevented the tragedy. State investigators concluded that the ride's sensors and design allowed dangerous seating conditions to go undetected. The operator faced scrutiny and lawsuits followed. In 2023, Orlando Freefall was permanently dismantled. What once dominated the skyline as a symbol of extreme thrill became a stark reminder of how small safety compromises can have irreversible consequences. Verrückt water slide disaster at Schlitterbahn, Kansas City.
New startling details on that terrifying accident that killed 10-year-old Caleb Schwab.
In 2014, Schlitterbahn, Kansas City unveiled Verrückt, a towering water slide whose name translates from German as insane. At 168 feet tall, it briefly held the record as the tallest water slide in the world. Riders descended in multi-person rafts, plunging down a near-vertical drop before soaring over a massive second hump. A netted canopy stretched overhead, installed after test rafts occasionally went airborne. On August 7, 2016, 10-year-old Caleb Schwab boarded Verrückt with two other riders. As their raft crested the second hill, it lifted into the air. Instead of landing smoothly, it struck a metal support pole that reinforced the overhead netting. The impact was catastrophic. Caleb died instantly. The two other riders suffered serious facial injuries. Subsequent investigations exposed troubling details. Internal testing had reportedly shown that rafts could become airborne, yet design adjustments focused on adding netting rather than re-engineering the slide's profile. The slide had been designed by individuals without formal engineering credentials. Concerns about weight distribution in the rafts had also been raised before the tragedy. The park immediately closed Verrückt, and it was later demolished. Legal battles followed, including criminal charges against key figures involved in the ride's design and operation, though outcomes varied over time. Verrückt had been marketed as the ultimate adrenaline rush, a record-breaking spectacle meant to push limits. Instead, it became one of the most devastating examples of ambition outpacing safety. The towering structure that once symbolized innovation now stands in memory as a warning about what happens when extreme design is not matched by extreme caution. Thrill can turn into tragedy in seconds, and stories like this remind us why safety should never be optional. If you found this eye-opening, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more.